I called Mama. She was so happy she cried. She wants you to have her wedding gown. It's white lace.
Yeah, that's good. I can't get married in your mother's dress.
You are wonderful.
Thank you. I've worked hard to become so. I admit it, you are better than I am. Then why are you smiling?
Because I know something you don't know.
And what is that?
I am not offended.
Well, sir, you were a cowardly son of a bitch. You just shot an unarmed man.
Well, he should have harmed himself. He's gonna decorate his saloon with my friend.
Boy, do I love Phantasm. It makes me laugh every time. Oh, hi, I'm Mark, and I am today the Cinemaniac because Tom is unavailable. And rather than deprive you, loving, kind, gentle, to-the-touch viewers of a program where one or both of us blabble about movies, I figured I would come in, and that way next week's show is a little less packed and we can give more than 45 seconds to each film we're going to talk about. Oh boy, Phantasm. Every time we play that intro, it makes me happy. Alamo Drafthouse Yonkers in New York, very close to New York City, it's not in, where I often go, is playing Phantasm with director Don Coscarelli in person pretty soon. He's going to be signing his book and all that, which is really cool. I don't think I can make it, but it's very cool if anybody out there is available to do that. So I've got a handful of films to talk about today. I didn't see everything Tom had prepared, but I saw everything that was new in the theater, and I saw some other stuff. So if by some chance I cannot fill 58 minutes blabbing about 4 movies, I'll tell you about what I did this weekend and talk about movies you may or may not have seen and what I thought of them after many years of watching and not watching them. Anyway, first up is the new big Disney release this weekend, and if you have MoviePass like me, it means you paid out of your pocket to see it. This is Ewan McGregor starring as the grown-up version of a young child from a series of well-known books by A.A. Milne. He's a man who has lost the spark in his life, who's in the drudgery of adulthood life, not in the hood, but, well, I guess wherever you live is your hood, especially if it's cold and rainy and you throw one over your head. He is the adult version of Christopher Robin. Teaser trailer was better. Sorry about that, folks. I had never seen that trailer. That's a longer trailer. Teaser trailer, if you don't understand when we throw that phrase around, is teaser trailer is usually the first trailer you see for something. It's usually very short. It's usually just enough to make you interested and want to find out more. To me, that's what a trailer should be. Trailer should not be the entire film condensed, which that kind of just was. So if you haven't seen Christopher Robin and you intend to, you have a really great idea of everything that happens in the movie. So anyway, the film is about, it opens with some very nicely recreated illustrations or illustrations in the style of the original A.A. Milne books. And it sort of explains who Christopher Robin was and Winnie the Pooh and all those characters. And it sort of, one page at a time sort of tells you what happens to him. And with some live action reenactment. So it sort of gets you used to seeing these characters as physical beings that look more, in the cartoon, which was how I always knew Winnie the Pooh, they looked like animals. They were very, realistic. Cartoon depictions of animals. In this film, they are made to look like stuffed animals, which you could understand a child, fantasizing about his adventures with his stuffed animals, and that's what this looks like. So you see the young Christopher Robin, and you see him grow up. You see him in stages of his life very briefly at the beginning of the film that get him to the Ewan McGregor version of himself. And it is not the first time we've seen a film about somebody who has fully embraced adulthood, which means they are all focused on work, they're neglecting the important things in life, and they need some spark or manic pixie or talking animal or something to show them that life is worth living and not, or life is meant to be lived and not just looked at through a ledger or your work schedule. So I thought this was going to be a cry-in movie. I think it probably is a cry-in movie for a lot of people. I think if you grew up with those cartoons, there was always something, man, about 70s kids entertainment always had this undercurrent of sorrow about it. Whether it was the way Frosty the Snowman, not that it was 70s, but Jesus, he melts at the end of it. Come on, that's Merry Christmas, kids. Now cry. So I thought this film would have more of that sadness to it, and the voice of Winnie the Pooh, and whoever they have doing it now, you'd think they dug up the guy who did it in way back when, because it sounds exactly like him. Some of the other characters are similar, but not quite. Brad Garrett I recognize as the voice of Eeyore, and you can tell it's Brad Garrett, but he still does the vocalizations pretty well. And Toby Jones does a voice, and Peter Capaldi does a voice, and some people you might know do the voices, but to me they were all lost in the character. It's not like I always say, you have John Cleese do a voice, and it's like, hey, that's John Cleese, and I'm not even thinking about the character anymore. So Christopher Robin, the characters come back into his life to help him find the meaning of Christmas and all that sort of thing. Funnier than I expected it would be, more upbeat than I expected it would be, because it's a story like this, I mean, it's Disney, so how dark is it going to be? But you could do a story like this, like a Return to Oz kind of thing, where it doesn't quite make you smile at the end. But this, not to give anything away, it's Disney. It does. And something I loved about this, I will give one thing away that was a surprise to me, and I really was happy they went this way. These characters are real. Everybody else sees them and hears them and talks to them and interacts with them, and it's not, one guy's madness or only one person can see it or anything like that. So I thought that was kind of cool. It was set in the 40s, perhaps, so it had an interesting feel to it. Nice sense of time and place, nice decor, if that's not an interesting enough word. So I liked this quite a bit. It was a nearly sold out show that I went to. The theater I saw it in Pennsylvania, I had to sit in the front row at too extreme an angle, frankly. Didn't hurt my enjoyment of the film. But when the film was over, the audience applauded, and it was like a full house applauding. And these are normal people. These aren't like film people who applaud when R.G. Armstrong's name hits the screen or something like that. This was like normal people, and they liked it that much. You heard a lot of laughter from kids and adults. And again, this wasn't one of those things that annoys me, where a film throws in pop culture references or subtle crude jokes or something like that to get the adults to laugh, or butt references to make the kids laugh, it was nice to have a film bereft of that for a change. So I thought Christopher Robin was quite good. I think if you grew up with Winnie the Pooh, you'd like it a lot. I think if Pooh is new to you, see a doctor. I think if Pooh is new to you, it probably still would be fun. I think they do a good job explaining who everybody is and what the relationships are. I just think if you have a little Pooh in your heart, then this probably will mean a little bit more to you. So that is in theaters now, and it will probably be in theaters, if I know how studios work, for at least 4 weeks, anywhere that you choose to see it. Up next, here. Up next, stop me if you've heard this one before. Sing along if you know the words. A small group of attractive 20-somethings are the only thing that can save us from a dystopian future using their special and unlocking the power within, showing you that it is important to be yourself and everybody is unique in the darkest minds.
Accidentally pull a speaker loose, please turn it in at our snack bar or box office.
So, from many producers of Arrival and Stranger Things, so it's got the kids and the powers thing going on. I was sort of dreading seeing this because I was mostly joking in that intro. It's not just like every other one of these things, but this is another series where it sets it up to be a series where special kids are the only ones who can stop an evil government from eradicating goodness and lightness and gummy bears in life. But this is, to me, was better than the rest of those. And I'm talking Divergent and Maze Runner and Hunger Games, and there were probably a couple of others. They all blurred together to me because they were all coming out at the same time. And I mean, it's all subjective whether you think this is better than those, but those all felt really similar, and this was a bit different. So basically the story is some mysterious disease wipes out the majority of children on Earth, and the ones that are left who are immune to this disease all have powers of some kind, and there are various levels. There's, if I recall, green means you're cool and you're really smart. Yellow means maybe you can do a little bit more psychically. Orange means you're kind of dangerous, and red means you can just like unleash hell upon people. So the government sets up camps, puts kids in the camps, tests them, and if you're an orange or a red, you're immediately killed. So the girl who's the star of this film, who was quite good, I don't know if I recognize her from something else, she's an orange who somehow manages, with the help of Mandy Moore, who, it is funny seeing her play like the adult character now, or as an adult as any good character can be in a film these days. And she gets smuggled out and finds another group of kids who are on the run, and they're trying to evade capture and get to this special place where these kids can live free in a commune-like setting and not be afraid of being killed or anything like that. I got a strong Walking Dead vibe from this in terms of the empty streets and foraging for food and looking through empty buildings and things like that, and all headed to some place that is the mecca where everything will be fine. The Walking Dead a couple seasons ago had a storyline that went that way, and the visuals are kind of similar. Film is well shot. It reminded me, this is like the Charlton Comics version of a superhero movie. It's like, it's not Marvel, it's not DC, but we're gonna give it a shot at this too. It's sort of a superhero movie. The kids have powers ranging from shooting fire out of their eyes to being able to erase people's memories or doing the Obi-Wan, these are not the droids you're looking for, or just being really good at math. All the kids who are in this little gang are very likable, which isn't always the case in a movie like this. The adults are mustache-twirling villains for the most part. There is some surprising, it's not explicit violence, but there's serious consequences to a lot of what goes on here. And they do it in a classy way. Like, if somebody is, pardon the phrase if there are children watching, if somebody's going to execute themselves, they cut away just at the right moment for it to have a lot of emotional and visceral impact, but you don't see any of the grue. I don't believe there's much in the way of anything explicit in this film at all. I don't know if there's even much of the way of language in this film. I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of cool. I didn't really expect much out of this. It wasn't teary-eyed, which of the two pretty boys am I going to like, although there is kind of that in there. I sort of spotted the villain, and when the villain first showed up, I figured that's who it was going to be, but that's okay. I don't care if I see movies that have shown me a lot that I've seen before. They just have to be interesting and not bore or insult me, and this didn't either. So I thought this was fun. I would totally be up for more of these movies because it looks like the next one is going to go in a slightly different direction. I don't know enough about it. I didn't research it to see if this was based on a book series. These all tend to be based on the popular, young adult fiction series. But I thought Darkest Minds was cool. I kept thinking it was going to be called The Darkest Hours and thinking it was about a young Winston Churchill who had powers, but it was sadly not that. Or Dangerous Minds, where it was going to be about a bunch of kids in the inner city trying to learn math. But Darkest Minds was not bad. So up next, the third and final feature, third and final new movie that came out this week that I saw in theaters, stars Mila Kunis and Kate McKinnon as two ladies on the lam, International style, when Mila Kunis's former boyfriend is killed and hands her a MacGuffin that sends them off to Vienna and parts east of here in The Spy Who Dumped Me. So, they said it twice. So, I can't say I was looking forward to this, but I was hopeful for this one. I want to like movies. I want to like a comedy once every 5 or 10 years. I want to like an action movie once every 5 or 10 years. And this looked like it had both of those going on. Technically, it did. I saw it with a pretty packed audience yesterday, again at the Alamo, because I was there for other stuff. And, okay, shut up when you watch a movie, okay? I'm not talking to you. I'm talking, because you wouldn't do that. But, just shut up when you watch a movie. It can all wait. You can have the rest of your life after a movie's over to talk about it. We only have this moment in time to see it for the first time uninterrupted. I had somebody sitting 2 seats away from me who just talked, like at the volume I'm talking about, just random stuff during this movie until I finally had to yell at her and she finally shut up. But it tainted the movie for me. So I gotta say, what I'm gonna tell you is there's a little anger when I think about this movie. Maybe you would have a different experience if you had actual civilized human beings sitting near you in the theater. I didn't think it was funny. That's the problem. I don't like a lot of modern comedy. It just wasn't funny. And for a while in this film, like, nobody in the theater was laughing. So I'm like, well, it's not just me. These people, I'm seeing it because I have to. They paid money because they want to see it. Eventually, there were moments where people got into it and were laughing out loud. I think maybe it took a little while to get its gumption going. My big beef with it was, so if I thought it wasn't funny but the action was good, I would be fine. I feel so bad for stunt coordinators and stunt performers because they put a lot of effort and time into these things and they risk their bodies and lives to do these things, and then hacks decide to shoot them really poorly and cut them very poorly. And very often during this film, there's a fight scene that I can tell is well choreographed, but I need to kind of actually see what's going on to be impressed by it. And it's either shot a little too tight or it cuts like at the wrong moment. It's cutting on impacts rather than before it. It's just not right. And I'm just like, I'm just off just enough. So there are things that are kind of impressive in this. Again, a lot of audiences are suckers, and it's okay to say, I'm going to change this into something else. Ready? Oh, it's something else. And I'm like, well, I kind of need to see that to be impressed by it. Off camera ain't quite good enough for me. So I didn't think the action was realized very well. If you're not particular about your action, if you think modern action movies are great, then this is probably going to be great for you because it actually shows things a bit better than the Bourne garbage does, but it's still not that great. So, and somebody will say, oh, well, it's a comedy, who cares about the action? Well, fine, we'll make it funny, which for me, it was not. A friend of mine was there and he thought it was really funny. So it might just be me. It might have been my experience, might be me, I don't know. It looks pretty. It is a globe-trotting film and you get to see some nice locations here and there. It's well shot. It's got pretty colors, which I like. The leads are likable for the most part. They're not super annoying. Kate McKinnon, I haven't seen her in the right thing yet. I'm not an SNL fan, and I saw her in the Ghostbusters movie, and I thought she was just weird in the Ghostbusters movie. And in this, she's kind of weird again. I kind of wanted to like what she was doing, but it was just kind of weird. So, very crude movie too. Not extremely crude, but cruder than it needed to be. Like it was R for language and male nudity and violence and stuff. And I'm watching it, and it all felt like unnecessary, like it was put in there to be edgy. I think you could have cut this to a PG-13 like super easily, and it probably would allow a lot more people in to see it. I'm not a fan of the worst use of the word vagina as comedy gold. I don't know what it is about any female-centric comedians or films, but these things act like the word vagina is hilarious, and it's not. If I say penis, it's not hilarious. It's just a body part. But maybe we haven't heard it that much in film and there's shock value or something. But it's just it's hacky, and there is a sack in the film too, if you want to talk about that. But I don't. There is a MacGuffin in this film, the hot potato that everybody is trying to get, and that's what these ladies are on the run. As I started to say earlier, Mila Kunis's boyfriend dumps her, and they go to get rid of all of his stuff, and he says, no, wait, there's something important. You need to bring it to me in Vienna, and it turns out it's a flash drive. So all these different agencies are trying to kill everybody and trying to get that flash drive. And before they reveal that it was a flash drive in the movie, I'm saying to myself, just don't be a flash drive. Every movie does a flash drive. It's so tired. Just make it be a hockey puck. Make it be a 20 questions thing. Just not a flash. Oh, it's a flash drive. Great. Not that I'm holding that against the movie. It was just one of those things that I'm like, oh, great. They went long on that one to make it be a flash drive. So anyway, I'm crabbing about a movie I didn't care about. Most of the people there seem to like it. So if it looks good to you, you're probably gonna like The Spy Who Dumped Me. Up next is a film I haven't seen, but the Colonial Theater here in Keene, New Hampshire is a sponsor of this program. I say fine program, but that's kind of more up to you than it is to me, isn't it? We have a film entitled, well, you don't know what it's entitled, a film about a rodeo or horseman, I think it is based on a true story to some degree, who suffers a serious accident and then has to come back from that accident to see if he can do what he once did, working with the pretty ponies out in the Old West and pretty areas when he is known for, and maybe it's even on his business card as, the Rider.
Hot dogs the way you like them.
So this is at the Colonial Theater here in Keene now, general release nationally, because I know some of you watch us outside this area, and we thank you for that, or at least I do. Well, he probably does too. He does. Let's say we thank you. We'll go back to the we thank you. Forget all that other stuff about excluding Tom from this. Based on a true story, the star of the film is the person it happened to. And I haven't seen it, so I won't spend much time on it, but I did read an Esquire review of the film today that listed it as one of the top 25 best films so far of 2018, and they said some of the visuals are just striking and beautiful. So I think every movie is better on the big screen. I think you can focus on a movie better in a theater, ideally. The screen is much bigger. No matter how big you think your TV is, you're not going to see the detail you're going to see on the big screen, and the sound is generally a lot better. So seeing a movie like this at the Colonial or any modern theater, you really can soak up those vistas a lot, and apparently this has some very painting-like Western vistas, so I almost want to see it just for that. I mean, Hell or High Water, one of my favorite movies of the last few years, that was one of the great things about that, were these just big sky country imagery of the Southwest, and it was just gorgeous. So The Rider is out now, and it is playing locally at the Colonial probably until this Thursday night, so you still have a little bit of a chance to go see that if you choose to do so. So that is all that is playing locally in theaters, probably more or less all that's playing nationally too, as far as new releases go. So we thank our friends at the Colonial Theater for sponsoring this program and being a cool old retro movie palace that's still open with a single screen and a balcony. They have a balcony. You could sit in the balcony. There was a theater in the town I grew up in, Claremont, New Hampshire, where this show also airs. Hi, folks. There was the Latches Theater. It was a single screen theater. That was where I saw my first movies that started all this. And it was built by the same Demetrius Latches, who also built the Colonial here in Keene. We also had a Latches here in Keene, too. And when I first came to Keene and went into the Colonial, I couldn't believe how similar it was to this theater of my youth that had been gone for a decade or two. And you could never go to the balcony in the Latches in my town when I was a kid because it was old and not safe. So I almost always sit in the balcony at the Colonial now, which is funny because I've been able to sit in the balcony at the Colonial far more times than I ever could have at the Latches as a kid, but it still doesn't quite fill that gap of not being able to do it back then. It's one of those funny things. There's also a Latches Theater in Brattleboro, Vermont, just 20 minutes away from here. Also a gorgeous theater with like Greek columns and statues on the walls, and the constellations painted on the ceiling and everything. And they've maintained their main theater still. They turned the balcony into a smaller theater, and they've carved out little theaters here and there, but they were our sponsor until recently. And if you're ever in the area, it is totally worth checking out something at these theaters, be it a live event or a film, because they're just gorgeous, and you don't really see theaters in a small town like that anymore. Anyway, see, this is what you miss when there are two of us here, or we have a lot more films to talk about because I just can't blather like this. Now going on to what is on home video on the service, device, platform, media format of your choice. We only have a couple because I'm choosing to only talk about things I've seen that were on the list today. So this is going to be a short list and a long way to go and a short time to get there. So first up, let me make sure. Oh, hi, how are you? We have Charlize Theron playing a middle-aged, early pre-middle-aged mother dealing with the stresses of life and the yearnings for her youth and what happens when a nanny comes to visit and turns her world upside down in Tully.
Tender too. So make Sunbeam bread your favorite choice.
She said it. So I saw this in the theater, and I really liked this in the theater. This pretty low-key movie, didn't get a major push. Sort of is an indie film, more or less. It didn't play very widely around. I think it played at the Colonial briefly toward the end of its run. So you have Charlize Theron, never afraid to dress down in a film. If you've seen Monster, you know that. Man, she's good. You kind of discount people who are good looking as actors sometimes, or some people do. They're like, they're a pretty face. But, sometimes yes, sometimes they're just a pretty face, and sometimes they're actually really, really good, and they happen to, they happen to clean up very well. So this is a story about a woman who is pregnant, who I feel like she already has another child. But at any rate, she's pregnant, she's feeling not very womanly. She's just stuck in the routine with her and her husband, played by Ron Livingston, who's a super great guy, super supportive, super nice, but he's got a lot of work to do and he travels a lot. And she is stuck with trying to, raise a soon-to-be-born child. So her brother, played by Mark Duplass, who's very wealthy, very comfortable, has nannies and has the life that makes them a little jealous or a little resentful or a little not liking him so much, offers a night nanny for her who would come and take care of the child while she sleeps so she could at least get a good night's sleep, and maybe the nanny would take care of some meal preparation or just make life easier for this woman who's, frayed at both ends. So come to think of it, I think she does have a kid or two before this new baby. And basically it is about the relationship between Charlize Theron and this young, again, manic pixie played by, pardon me just a moment while I refer to this text, Mackenzie Davis, who I've seen before but I couldn't quite put my finger on. It's their relationship and how it, at first, when I saw the trailers for this initially, I saw a shorter trailer than that, I thought, ooh, this is going to be like a Hand That Rocks the Cradle thing. This is going to get dark and weird and perverse. And it doesn't. It's dramatic, but it's also very light at times. There's laughing in it. There's tender moments. And it's really about how these two women bond and sort of become two halves of sort of what a perfect mother could be if you could split yourself into 2 or 3 people, and how it affects her relationship with her other children and with her husband and with her brother and other people. And there's a huge twist I never saw coming toward the end of this movie. It didn't need to do this, but when it did, it was like, whoa, now I'm going to rethink everything I saw up to this point. It was really interesting. It was really good. It was written by, I believe, written by Diablo Cody, who did Juno and Jennifer's Body and a bunch of other things. Jennifer's Body? I think that's what it was. And it's just a good movie for grown-ups. We don't get a lot of those these days. It tends to be movies about lasers and children with superpowers or talking animals or something. And once in a while, you just like a kind of a realistic movie about folks, you know? Rated R for, I think, inebriation and profanity and sauciness and all that. But honestly, in this movie, it was less offensive than it was in The Spy Who Dumped Me. It made a lot more sense to be in there. So I would highly recommend Tully if you are a grown-up. If you are a mature teenager, if you're like an incredibly mature 8-year-old, maybe you want to see Tully. If you're a Charlize Theron fan, a Ron Livingston fan, I would recommend it especially if you are a lady who is moving toward the 40s, somewhere in the neighborhood of the 40s. I think it will resonate a lot. I think if you're a dude somewhere in that, it's probably going to resonate a lot. And I can't say enough about how good Tully was. It was really, really good. So next up, do we want to run the graphic? We got time, we'll run the graphic. It's the Arrow Video Corner. There's nobody to shoot. It got, I think it got Sam Jackson right in the gun hand. We have one title from Arrow that, oh, there it is. It got, oh no, I think it got Mr. Travolta right in the rib. His dancing career is now dashed. So Gotti probably dashed a lot of other parts of his career too. So we have one title from Arrow. There's a whole bunch more on the way, never fear. This is just the one that is coming out this week. We have a Japanese gangster movie, tough guy, rough and tumble gangster movie, and it is, well, it's called Street Mobster.
3 completely new kinds of Ford cars for 1960.
I believe that man was lacerated. So here we have a fine example of the Japanese Yakuza gangster movie. There was a lot of them. There still are a lot of them. A lot of them tend to blur together for me, unless it's a Seijun Suzuki where you get like a branded Tequila or a Tokyo Drifter that are just like crazy, weird, and stylish. Those tend to stand out. But for me, a lot of the Yakuza films are like a lot of period samurai or period martial arts movies for me. They all have a very similar look. The characters kind of look the same in terms of their clothes and their mannerisms, and a lot of them kind of, I'm hard-pressed to remember any specific ones. So this puts me in the mind of, and it may even be connected to, the Battles Without Honor and Humanity series that was a 60s, maybe more 70s series of Yakuza, rise and fall of gangster organized crime films. This is about a guy who goes to jail as like a street tough, a gang member in his maybe 20s or so, does a lot of time, and then comes back and tries to put the old gang back together, try to put the band back together, and take on rival gangs and basically work his way back up to where he would have been had he not been in the Huskow. He gets a bunch of just kind of dumb, rough and tumble street punks to be on his side, and they just one by one go through all these other gangs and all these other, offices and bathhouses and a whole lot of bathhouse action. A whole lot of people rutting or squirming in tubs for a good or bad reason in this film. It was very rough and tumble visually, very sloppy is the word I want to use. A lot of shaky camera work, a lot of guys slapping the hell out of each other and knifing each other and shooting each other. So it's not on the delicate side of sensibilities or violencia. It wasn't terribly memorable to me by the time it was over because it felt to me kind of repetitive. It wasn't bad. It was just, it's not a genre that I love. So if you're a big fan of these, this may hold a lot more weight than it did for me. It looked great. Arrow always does a fantastic job on its transfers, obviously. The extras are a little lighter than a lot of Arrow releases. You've got as the clip showed, you've got an audio commentary by film historian Tom Mess, and that, I listened to it, and it was very interesting, but he's, English is not his primary language, so there's a bit of an accent, and sometimes you have non-native English speakers, their cadence is a little weird, like they go up at the end of sentences, or just some of the rhythms are weird, so it made it a little less comfortable for me to listen to, so to speak. It's nothing against the man, he knows far more than I do about these films. It was interesting, it was just not as breezy a listen as these sometimes are. Also has the original trailer, which is cool because you've got the splashy titles and the cool music that these things were scored with. And then there's a still gallery. So it's a little light on the extras, but that's fine. Ultimately what you're going to watch again is the movie. So if you like this sort of thing, I can't imagine you wouldn't like Street Mobster. It just was not one that stood out from the pack for me. But that's out now from Arrow, wherever finer films are sold. Okay, so that's all that's on our list. But I have 16 minutes, and I'm going to talk about some other stuff. I'm going to tell you about my weekend. Can I show you my vacation slides? So as you may or may not know, or care, I spend my weekends at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater in Laheyton, Pennsylvania. It's an all-retro, all 35mm drive-in. So every weekend we do double or triple features of old films, whether it's a horror movie or a musical or a car chase movies or baseball movies or whatever. This weekend was our second annual Universal Monster Mash. So we ran 4 Universal Monster classics on film and 2 movies per night. So night 1 was Dracula, original Bela Lugosi Dracula from '31, and Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I love, you love, most people love Creature from the Black Lagoon. In 2D, because frankly the prints that are in 3D are garbage. I would not recommend anybody go to see those. It's the bogus red-blue anaglyph 3D that never was what 3D originally was and doesn't work very well. The print I saw it on locally a couple of years ago had faded. And to print a black and white 3D movie, you have to print it on color stock so that the red and the blue are on there with the transparent overlays. And when a color film fades, the colors shift. So this black and white movie is now kind of yellowish, and the red and the blue are kind of not quite red and blue anymore. So when you put those glasses on that are red and blue, it just doesn't quite work. The real way you want to see Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D is 2-projector polarized 3D, which very few theaters can do anymore on film, or you want to see a nice new DCP 3D restoration with modern 3D, which I did see again at the Alamo, and that was amazing. And I think there is a Blu-ray, 3D Blu-ray, not the red and the blue, not the anaglyph, but an actual 3D Blu-ray you can get of this film. And it's always been stated as one of the better 3D movies where you can see the fish floating in front of you and all that other stuff. But even without the 3D, unlike a lot of 3D movies, without the 3D, Creature from the Black Lagoon rocks. Second night was original Frankenstein, also from 1931, with Boris Karloff, and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein with Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr., and Glenn Strange as the Monster, and uncredited Vincent Price at the end of the film as the Invisible Man. So what I was going to do with this time was talk about those movies, because these are all movies that you can get on video. These are movies that you may or may not have ever seen. You probably have, but for me it was very interesting watching them again. These are movies I grew up watching on Creature Double Feature on Channel 56 out of Boston. You probably saw them on a similar thing if you're my age, or you saw them on video if you're not my age, or you saw them in the theater if you're really not my age. So Dracula, 31. I watched this a couple of Halloweens ago. I'd seen it on TV as a kid. Uber classic, it's undeniable. Lugosi is the Dracula that everybody bases their Dracula impression on. It's the Dracula that solidified in people's minds what Dracula should be like, and he's iconic. But when you watch this movie from 1931, Universal, directed by Todd Browning, who did Freaks and some other cool stuff, it's really creaky. It's really creaky. The acting is very mannered. The acting is very old-style stage acting, which is because this was a stage play. This was a stage play that Lugosi had toured the world with in the role of Dracula. So he brought that performance to this movie. It's also an early sound film, relatively early sound film. So it's very quiet. There's not a lot of music in it. There's strange breaks in line delivery, like he'll pause in weird places, gesturing in weird ways. Some of the movement is kind of stagey and weird. But at the same time, man, does this movie have atmosphere. This is a great movie to watch late at night in a quiet house or at a drive-in on a quiet night. Sadly, it was raining the whole time on Friday. Didn't deter anybody. We still had a lot of people there, but in the rain might not be the best way to watch this. There are moments, there are really amazing, iconic shots. The sets are amazing. If you've seen Young Frankenstein's a really accurate recreation of the sets from Frankenstein and Dracula. So it's an important movie, and it has its moments, but boy, is it still one that I find myself a little distracted when I watch the original Dracula. And it's much longer than you'd expect, too, for a film of that era. You always expect those early films are going to be about an hour because they would double feature these things, but I think it was a bit more like 70 minutes. Anyway, the print that Universal sent us was perfect. Like to the degree where you could tell me it was digital and I would believe it. There's not a speck on it, there's not a splice, there's not a crackle in the soundtrack. Universal knew where their money was coming from and where the bread and butter was. And these movies would rent and play theaters over and over and over again. So it was always in their interest to keep a good print of it out there. And that's what we got. So it looked amazing, it looked great. Followed by Creature from the Black Lagoon. I love it. It looks great. It's efficient. That soundtrack is badass. The creature theme is great. It knows what it's doing. It's got some really good photography, the underwater photography where Julia Adams is swimming and the creature is mirroring her underwater is iconic and amazing and great to see on the big screen. The creature is ferocious and cool. I got to meet Rico Browning, who was the actor who was in the creature suit for all the underwater sequences many years ago, and he's a nice guy. He still does conventions all around the country, actually. Anyway, Creature is great. They made 2 sequels. They did Revenge of the Creature, which is also a lot of fun with Clint Eastwood, young Clint Eastwood in it. He's also in Tarantula in a tiny, tiny part. And they made another film called The Creature Walks Among Us, where they basically, he gets burned up and they save his life and they take his gills out and he's a man who walks the earth, like Kane in Kung Fu. And it's, Creature Walks Among Us is not that great. They turn him sort of into a sympathetic Frankenstein character, but it's interesting to see. So those were the first night. Those were great. Those were wonderful. The second night was Frankenstein. This is really interesting. Watch Frankenstein and Dracula close together. They're not long movies. Frankenstein made the same studio, the same year, and it feels like it was made 10 or 20 years later if you look at Dracula, because Dracula is so stagey and creaky and slow and not a lot of cutting and not great camera angles. And Frankenstein is amazing. It feels like it has a modern sensibility. The performances are a lot more on point. They're a lot less than Dracula is, and good camera angles. Again, the sets are amazing. These cavernous sets of the castle are outstanding. And Karloff as the monster, you have to put yourself back in the mind of what audiences had been used to seeing in 1931. And people were horrified by this movie. There's actually a guy, they filmed an intro to the film where a guy comes out and addresses the audience and basically says, okay, look, you're gonna see some scary stuff right now. And I just wanna warn you, you're gonna see some scary stuff. And for people back then, there were people who fainted and who screamed and who left the theater because they couldn't handle this insane Jack Pierce makeup creation and this bizarre, patchwork cadaver come back to life. The film still works great. There are a couple moments that are a little maybe silly by modern sensibilities as far as how they're conveyed, but I was totally with it the whole time. It was fantastic. It's iconic. You can't argue with Frankenstein. And again, Frankenstein was a book. There had been a silent Edison version of Frankenstein done before, but it was this Frankenstein that is what everybody thinks of. It's what Universal has copyrighted so that if you do Frankenstein, it can't look like that makeup. And it's the Frankenstein against all others are judged. And there have been Frankensteins since. There was a Coppola-produced Kenneth Branagh Frankenstein with Robert De Niro, and there were Hammer Frankensteins, and there was Frankenstein General Hospital, and there was a whole bunch of other stuff like that, but you can't hold a candle to Boris doing his thing. Second film, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, way later, made after the Universal Monsters cycle was pretty much done. You take Abbott and Costello, wildly popular comedians, and if you don't know Abbott and Costello, you probably know who's on first. And if you don't know that or them, look up that or look up the math routine that people post on Facebook and on YouTube, because they were really funny guys. You had Abbott, the straight man, who was the serious guy, and Costello, who was like the man-child who made funny faces and funny noises and was, in Id Run Wild, and it was fantastic. And they basically play these two guys who are delivery men, or they work at the post office, and they have to take some crates to a wax museum. And the crates happen to contain the actual Dracula and the actual Frankenstein monster. And Larry Talbot, the Wolfman, is in the neighborhood too for some reason, and they all get mixed up with each other. And it's just an excuse for a lot of sequences where Costello gets really scared and goes, much like Ryan Gosling did if you saw The Nice Guys, I had me falling out of my seat, a wonderful ode to in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. It's funny, the monsters are cool, it's cool to see them all together in one spot. There were also some Universal monster rallies, they called them, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, where you got a lot of the different monsters in one place at the same time, but it wasn't Lugosi as Dracula, and it wasn't, with this, in Abbott and Costello, it's not Karloff as the monster, but anyway, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, it's very funny, it's very cool, it moves right along, it is still beloved by old and young alike. We had a great audience, mix of everything from very little kids to senior citizens, and everybody had a fantastic time. That, again, the Frankenstein and A&C print were perfect. So it was a really great night. And the projectionist, Jeff Mahoney, also, from his private collection, brought in 2 old Three Stooges shorts. I'm a huge Stooges fan, so knowing that was going to happen made it very special. You don't get a lot of chances to see the Stooges on the big screen. A lot of people don't like the Stooges, which is too bad. And a lot of people think, yeah, I've seen them on TV. it's different when you watch it on a big screen. You see so many, dare I say, subtleties in a Three Stooges film, but you do. You see a lot of subtleties in the comedy. They're funnier on the big screen, and I've lived my whole life seeing them on the small screen with a few lucky occasions where I saw them in a theater. So one of the prints was an original release print. So this is the piece of film that audiences saw when this film was new. I got to hold in my hands and touch the case. And it was, I say an emotional experience. I wasn't crying or anything, but I'm just, as a huge Stooges fan, it meant a lot to actually be seeing the way this film, people originally saw it. There was this really cool, like, thin film can. Usually film cans are pretty sizable. It's a single reel, and it had the Columbia logo or Columbia stamped on it, and it was this odd octagonal thing with a strange latch. It was very cool anyway. The original print looked fantastic. Beautiful, I was going to say color. Sharp contrast, sharp picture, still funny. It was Love at First Bite with Shemp, and it's the original band, paper band that came with the film was still on it. And the curly short was False Alarms, which was a lot of fun the second night. So at any rate, we all had a great time. I figured I would share that with you, mostly to honestly pad out the show. And if you care about Universal Monsters, maybe you're curious about checking them out again, and I don't know, send us an email, movies@CheshireTV.org. If you have a favorite Universal Monster movie, let us know. We like hearing from you. We like to know anybody watches this foolishness. So I think I'm probably going to wrap up. Probably? Yeah, why not? Next week, we will have, let me check my mutes, The Meg. Oh boy, can I talk about The Meg for 5 minutes? So it's a new film with Jason Statham, where he's fighting a giant shark. And I don't mean duking it out, although I haven't seen the movie, so maybe he does. Maybe he gets, you know, foxy boxing gloves with those big old shark. It's about a giant shark from prehistoric era shark that is bigger than Jaws, and how people take it out. It looks silly. It looks like a Sci-Fi Channel movie with a budget, and sure, why not? I like Sci-Fi Channel movies if they're not stupid, if the effects aren't so terrible they take you out of it. I have a feeling this one has more money than a Sci-Fi Channel movie, so I'm open to it. Why not? It looks like another Chinese-backed film that we're seeing more and more of because that's such a huge market. So I think you're going to see a good amount of, I think it may be set in Asia, and I think you're going to see a good amount of Asian cast in this film, which is fine with me. I got no beef with that. So The Meg, I think, is the big thing next week. I see also on my list Slender Man and Dog Days. I think probably because Christopher Robin came out and it was huge, and Mission Impossible came out and it's still huge, I have a feeling most theaters are probably only going to get one new feature this week, at least where we are with some, you know, non-chain theaters. So, you know, good luck with whatever you have going. I would say of this week's films, Christopher Robin would be the one to see. I would say if you haven't seen Mission Impossible, it's really good. I would highly recommend that. I would still recommend seeing Ant-Man. There's still a lot in theaters that's quite good, actually. And also, if you can see Blind Spotting, which I saw at the Alamo Drafthouse a couple weeks ago, or 8th Grade, which is slowly rolling out. I believe 8th Grade actually is coming to the Colonial in Keene, so I would, if you live locally, wait and see it here. Support. Did I call somebody to action? No, I said I would recommend that you wait and see it here because, you know, if you don't have to drive. So until next week, I remain your humble host, and I wish you a wonderful time, and you'll next week see Tom and I here on the Cinemaniacs.